We are definitely in the digital age and we are using apps more and more so. But have we really thought about the digital cybersecurity, particularly around, taxis and, well, Uber? So in this week's Future Talk with Shara Evans, we're going to be talking about just that. So, Shara, what can you enlighten us with?
Well, as you know, I'm a keynote speaker and I do events. These days, most of them have been virtual where I'm just at home. But over the past couple of weeks, I've actually gone to client sites where it's not actually an audience in an event. It's just an AV team doing some filming, and I'm doing it at the client site. And these have been in Sydney, and normally when I'm going into the Sydney CBD, I would just use an app from Silver Taxis, which is down here in Sydney, and I've been using it for years. Being very cyber conscious, even though I know that services like Uber are less expensive, I don't like the idea of having an app on my phone that has my credit card details, that if I happen to leave my phone somewhere or it stays unlocked because I purposely have left the screen unlocked because I'm doing recording or using it as a countdown timer or something else, it's possible that as cyber conscious as I am, I could end up leaving something unlocked. So
Yeah.
I tend to not use any mobile apps that require credit cards or anything else. And even with two-factor authentication, if it's something that's going to come across the same phone that's unlocked, that's not actually going to help me very much.
Yep.
So about 2 weeks ago, I was on my way to an event in the CBD, and I was booking a taxi, and I hit book, and that's normally all I do. And then a few minutes later, a taxi shows up because I live fairly close to the CBD. And luckily, I happened to look down at the app and saw that there was this brand new requirement to enter a credit card and that my taxi had not actually been booked. So I ended up having to call the call center and wait and order a taxi manually by telephone. And trust me, I was not at all impressed, Liz. I thought, this is just bad news. And I mentioned it to the taxi driver, and he was actually very surprised because he didn't know that this had happened. And he went and tried it on his app as well and said, oh my gosh, wow, I had no idea. And he said, well, why don't you try 13cabs, try their app because, it ultimately can let you book the same service. And we looked at that app and guess what? It was the same thing.
Yeah.
So let me show you what happens when you try to book a service using Silver. So I should mention, I had to go into the city today to do another event, and same thing. And I'll tell you about the conversation I had with the driver after I show you the app. So this app is from Silver Service, and I don't know how well you can see it, but
Yeah.
it actually has a button in there that literally you cannot book, and I've tried it because that's what happened to me a few weeks ago. You cannot book unless you enter a credit card, and then once it's in there, then it's there forever. But when it's an app, it's not even like going to a website where you've got HTTPS, and SSL certificates in cybersecurity. You've got no idea what kind of security is actually behind an app. And to me, that's a problem. And I'll show you also on 13cabs, same thing. So here, I'll hold this up. And I don't know if you can see this, but you can see it's actually saying add payment. Can you see that?
Yep. Yep.
So do you have that in Brisbane? I don't know if you've taken any taxis recently.
Admittedly, I haven't taken a taxi in ages, so I haven't checked it.
Well, I've got to say, first of all, a couple of weeks ago, the driver was just completely dumbfounded. Today, when I was talking to the driver, he said, aside from cybersecurity, it's even worse than that for me as a driver, because what this means is that instead of getting paid right away when you're in the taxi, so like let's say I'm taking a taxi and I use my credit card, the driver has said, when I use my credit card, it's his FPOS machine. So he would get paid for the trip right away, or if I pay him cash, depending on, or a cab charge or whatever I'm doing, right? He would get paid right away. But he said to me that when people book through the app, I have to wait for the owner of the cab to decide that they have enough money to pay me. And it's usually at least a week. I found that pretty outrageous. What about you?
Yeah, it is. It certainly impacts. But then I suppose that is probably also what happens with Uber as well.
Well, I don't know that that's the case with Uber. I'm
Okay.
pretty sure I've heard with Uber that the driver gets paid pretty much right away, if memory serves me. Now, mind you, I haven't looked into that for a while, but I was really surprised that the driver told me that it's actually not in the driver's benefit at all for someone to use this app. And he said, look, I'm not a cybersecurity expert, but I wouldn't be comfortable putting my credit card into an app that I had no idea what kind of security was involved, and whether my phone might get stolen or used, or my credit card's in there and who knows what can happen.
Yeah, I suppose they're trying to compete with the the Ubers and the DiDi and etc.
But first of all, how are you going to compete by forcing a customer to enter a credit card into an app? Number one.
Because that's kind of what you have to do with Uber and DiDi and all those apps.
But the difference is you pay a lot less when you take an Uber than you would with a taxi. So I don't see that that would give any kind of competitive advantage. And I actually think it's putting consumers at risk by forcing them to enter credit cards. And what about people who don't have credit cards?
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who, especially now in the midst of this economic crisis that we're in because of coronavirus, may not have a valid credit card because they've been, out of work for a period of time, or maybe it's somebody whose eyesight isn't really good and they didn't know that they've got to put this in ahead of time, and they're trying to get somewhere in a hurry, and now they're fumbling around and trying to find their credit card and trying to find their glasses and all the rest. To do that completely unannounced, I think, is just untoward. And
yeah, I mean, we're getting into that digital age, but I don't think we have got the policies or everyone is up to date to be able to adjust to that, whether it's a digital age or whether we're able to really adjust to it yet. So there is some issues that companies need to consider.
Well, especially, and I would say it's, I'm using an example of the taxi industry because this is something that has literally taken place over the last couple of weeks and today.
Yep.
But I would imagine that there are likely other apps that are asking for people to enter their credit cards. And once again, unlike going to a secure website where you know that it's encrypted as you're putting the information in, you just don't know how safe that transmission is as you're putting it in, and how it's stored, where it's stored, how they might use it, who might have access to your phone if you lose it. So I'm not a big fan of that.
Yeah. And it's certainly something that we have to consider, and it's certainly something that businesses need to consider on whether we're at that stage that it really is pay before purchase kind of thing.
Well, in talking to the drivers, and again, this is only a couple of them, they did not express any concern with customers not paying, So it's not like there was this big problem where people were taking taxis and not paying and just ripping off the drivers. This was just an initiative that wasn't even discussed with the drivers, much less the consumers, which is not
hard. Yeah, exactly. But we have run out of time.
Of course we have, Liz.
Of course.
When we're chatting. Great talking to you. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to listen.